Guys, the DAFim are actually smaller, substantially, which is amazing. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN DAF Dalid. We are going to continue to discuss the machlokes between Abaye and Rava, Bishitas Rav Nachman. And as we had on DAF Gimel Amid Beis, towards the top of the Amid, that Amar Abaye Mishmeid Rav Nachman, that you have Amas that are Bas Chamisha. Sometimes when Chazal use the measurement of an Amma, it's Bas Shisha. And basically, wherever the more chamur conclusion, outcome will happen, that is the type of Amma that you apply, as we learned. We learned about Amos Mavoi, we learned about the Amma versus of Kalayim, etc. We left off last year that the Rabbi, that's towards the bottom of Gimel Amid Beis, also has his tradition of what Rav Nachman said. Yes, there are two different types of Amos, different sizes of the same Amma. However, they are all, that was his words, Kol Amos were Ba'ama Bashisha. True, you have different halachas and they are applied differently, same concept. However, it's not 5 to 6, but it's called Zajac versus Atsevois. Literally, Zajac means smiley, happy. Atsevois means sad. What it means is that when you make your tefach, you can make your tefach leaving your hand loose. That's called smiling, as if when a person smiles many times, their lips part. Versus atsevois, when a person is sad, then their lips become very clenched or tight. That's when you make your fist very tight. So you're always using an amma of 6. However, whether you leave your hands loose or tight will also make a difference in the conclusion. And the same concept that wherever the chamur dika application comes out, that's the type of amma that you apply. And we will see that even according to Rava's version, Mishmeid Rav Nachman, there is a place, and that's in the Beis HaMikdash, where we did have amos that are Bas Chamisha, and we're going to be reviewing a sugya that we're going to have, that we're going to have, God willing, again in Menachos, that speaks about the height of the outer altar and the way it was built, right? That you had the widest part was in the bottom, and as you went up, it became narrower. And for whatever reason, which is going to be phenomenal, very interesting, there in the Mizbeach itself, there was no consistency. Some of the Amas was Taka Bashisha, some of them was Bas Chamisha. As God willing, we will describe how the Mizbeach is to be built. We will learn on Daf Daled the statement that shiurim and chatzitzin and mechitzin are halacha l'Moshe Sinai. In other words, shiurim, when we're speaking about our shiurim, whether the shiur of an Amma is Bas Shisha, Bas Chamisha, Zajac or Atsevois, many other shiurim, the shiur of a Kazayis, the shiur of a Geregeres, the shiur of a Kesava Sagasa, all of that is, we'll see halacha l'Moshe Sinai, the dinim of chatzitza meaning that when a person has to go to the mikvah, so then you have to have the waters going around all of their body, all of their hair. What happens if there's something interposing between their body and or their hair to the waters of the mikvah? So we're going to learn that midin Torah, what is a chatzitza? If you have a chatzitza on the majority of the area, now we're going to learn, there's so many different ways of learning the dinim over here. We're going to separate the body part the area where there's the basar versus the area of the hair. Each area is a standalone area. So if there is something that's covering the roiv means either the majority of the hair of the head or the majority of the body. And if the person is bothered by it, if you're makbid on it, that is a chatzitza d'oraisa. If it's only something interposing on the minority, even though you're makbid, or if it's something covering the majority but you're not makbid, then midoraisa it's not a chatzitza, but it is a chatzitza midrabanan. And then if neither, it's both mute and you're not makbid, then even midrabanan it's not a chatzitza. However, when it comes, for example, for a woman going to the mikvah, we're machmir lechatchila that we don't want for any chatzitza to be there. But after the fact, if we discovered that there was a chatzitza, but it was not covering the majority, nor was the woman makbid, then the tefilla will be a kosher tefilla. We're going to be learning more about the laws of a mechitza. We're going to speak about 3 dinim. By the way, we already mentioned one in the last year, which is the doifen akuma, but you also have a concept of lavud, which means that if there is a breach in a mechitza, as long as the opening is less than 3 tvachim, we view that breach as if it's filled in. And then you have a concept called good. Good means that we extend. Now, good extending is a two-way street. If, let's speak about sukkah, if you have a wall and the wall is anchored on the ground, but it doesn't go all the way up to the schach, so we say good asik. Once the wall has the minimum height of 10 tefachim, we make believe it goes up until where it needs to go up to. There's also a concept called good achis, the opposite, that if there's a wall coming down, let's say from the schach, but it doesn't go all the way down to the ground. Now, if it comes within 3 tefachim from the ground, is gewaldik. But if it doesn't come all the way down, then we also theoretically apply the concept of good achis, that we extend the partition downwards. But guys, as we just learned in the early kufs, I think it was kuf aleph in Masechta Shabbos, that the good achis is going to be broken if you have 3 tefachim or more from the ground that's empty, because gedoyim boikim boy. Because since little animals, little goats go back and forth in there, so if animals are moving back and forth in this imaginary wall, it breaks the din of good achis. Interestingly, as we'll learn later, not that far from now, we're going to learn actually in DAF Hey, the concept of pi tikra yoyed v'soisim, that when you have a roof, no wall going down, just a roof, that we are allowed to take the edge of the roof and also imagine in an imaginary way. So to say, make believe as if it goes all the way down to the ground. Pi tikra yoyed v'soisim, that's a greater, stronger instrument than good achis. And even if gedoyim boikim boy, even though it's opened, it doesn't matter. We do halachically apply the mechitza over there. Guys, if you remember, we learned this in Shabbos in the context that if you're off on a boat and you have a mechitza going down a little bit, then by the water, we do say good achis, and we don't say since fish are swimming back and forth, it breaks that mechitza. We spoke about that in Shabbos, and we'll learn a lot more about this, God willing, later in this Masechta. All right, Chevra, let's start where we left off. We left off on that Gimel, Amid Beis, Mamish, the last line of the Amid. So again, we have Shitas, Abaya, Mishmeid, Rav Nachman, that you have Amasuk and Amas Mavui, Ba'amish, Ba'ama Bas Chamisha. By Kalayim, the Amma is Bashisha. And as the Gemara concluded, it's not a hard and fast rule, but from the various cases, the majority of the cases, it comes out L'chumra by Chamisha, by Suk and Mavui, and in the majority of the cases, it comes out L'chumra by Kalayim, by Bashisha. But whenever it's going to come out L'chumra, the opposite, we do the opposite. And again, Rava, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid, Rava, in the name of Rav Nachman, holds, as we just read in the Gemara, that Kol Amo is Ba'ama Bashisha. No, there isn't, at least generally not, outside of the Beis HaMikdash. There isn't an Amma that's Bashisha. Yes, there are different sizes Ammas, but they are in Bashisha itself, Soichakois and Atzevis. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to actually start to challenge Shitas Abaye. Says the Gemara Meisvei, we learned in a Braisa, Kol Amoy Sha'omru Chachamim Ba'ama Bashisha. Mamish clear. Atana. Whenever Chazal use the word Amma, an Amma is comprised of 6 tvachim. Ubulvad, turning to the Abdallah Damadalif, Shelo Yiyu Mechuvanos. as long as you remember that they're not exactly alike. They're not exactly alike. Sometimes the Amma Bas Shisha is bigger. Sometimes the Amma Bas Shisha is smaller. Mamish like Rava, says the Gemara. Bishleima, Lirava, Mamish. It's all Bas Shisha, but they're not Nechuvanois. It's not exactly the same because like we mentioned, sometimes we use an Amma by having the Tfachim a little bit looser, meaning a little bit bigger. And Bahalalu, and other times, we have the Amma, which is made out of the same 6 Tfachim, but those Tfachim are called sad Tfachim, tighter Tfachim, smaller Tfachim. Elola Abaye, Kasha, right? Kol Amoisha Amra Chacham Ba'ama Bashisha. Elola Abaye, don't read in the Braisa, Kol Amoisha Amru Chachamim. No. Ema Amas Klayim Ba'ama Bashisha. Givaldik. Now hold on. What does it mean? Shalayir mechuvanos. So let's read inside Rashi. 3 lines from the top of the Amid. Ema amas kalayim ba'ama bashisha. Hachi ka'amar kol amay she'amru b'kaloyim ba'ama bashisha. Which indeed, even according to Abaya, right? Generally it's l'chumra. Ubelvad. However, shalayir mechuvanos mitzumtzamos. Not only is it bashisha by kalayim, unlike, for example, by Mavi, it's Bas Chamisha, even La'abaye, he's also acknowledging that you can make every tefach smaller or larger. So even by the Bashisha, make that larger as well. Those amas should not be mechuvanos. Mechuvanos means not that they should not be exactly alike. According to Abaya, mechuvanos means don't make them small, don't make them mitzumtzum, don't make them mitzumtzumais. Elo gedoilas b'tfachim that are soichakos, because that's the chumrah. Not only are you making an amma bas shisha, but large bas shisha. Okay. Problem is, back inside the Gemara, 4 lines from the top of the Amid, in the same Braisa, after the Chachamim say the words that kol amma yisha amru chachamim amma bas shisha, says later, when we're trying to say for Ashbak says no, kol amma yisha amru chachamim b'klayim is ba'amma bas shisha. And even in Kalayim itself, it's not only its larger amois, but the tefach there is also the bigger tefach. So this is what Rashbag is saying, that it's only by Kalayim that it's bashisha. So doesn't that imply, Mechlal, that the Tanakama, Taka means kol amois, which will include the amois that are used for Mavi, which will include the amois that we use for Sukkah. Not like Abaya and the Shmei that Rav Nachman. So Amalach Abaya, you're right. I stand corrected. I am unable to amend or to understand the meaning of the Tanakama statement, Kol Amash Amar Chacham Ba'ama Bashisha, only for Kalayim, because indeed that's what Rashbag holds. But no, you no longer can challenge me from this Braisa, because it is a Machlokes Tanoim, and I have the right to choose and to hold like Rashbag, or I have you cannot refute Rav Nachman, because Rav Nachman will hold like Rashbag. So b'meila, I know the Amri Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Very good. So now the Gemara says, La'abaya vadai tanoi, like he himself needed to acknowledge. In other words, when his version of Rav Nachman is only according to one opinion. L'Rava milema tanoi, but will Rava have to learn that way as well? In other words, the Tanakama for sure conforms to Rava Shita. That Rava says in the name of Rav Nachman that it's all bashisha. But what will be Shita's Rashbag according to Rava? Amalach Rava, that Rashbag ha asala ashma'inan amas kalayim lo yitzamtzem. The Rashbag is not arguing with the Tanakama, Rava. The Rashbag is clarifying Shita's Tanakama. What is he clarifying? That not only, like we explained, that by Kalayim, Shaliyah Mechuvanis. Now, according to Rava, the word Shaliyah Mechuvanis, which is the top words we have in the Amid, it means it's not always alike. But when do we apply the larger ones? When do we apply the Mitzumtzumais ones? That's not something that's explicitly spoken out. So the Rashbag wanted to make that clear. In other words, he wanted to make it clear that you always go L'chumah. Asks the Gemara if that's the meaning of Rashbag. Rashbag says, Kol Amoisha Onchom B'Kilayim Ba'ama Bashisha. Now, if there is only the Amma Bashisha, asks the Gemara V'Lema Amas Kilayim Lo Yitzamsem, if all he needs to do is to make it clear that what Shitas Tanach is. It's just clarifying. But why does he have to mention the word amas kala? Why does he have to say kol? Right, kol ama. Lema amas kalayim lo yitzamtzim. Why does he have to say ba'ama bashisha? So it's if, like Rava holds, there's only an ama bashisha, so it's given. And the Tanach already said the words kol ama am bashisha. All he's coming to clarify is that by the kalayim you make the larger ones. You don't make the smaller ones. Lo yitzamtzim. So why does he have to say the words bashisha? Is it not lav lema'uti that indeed like Abaya holds that at least according to the Rashbag, by Yamasuka and by Amas Mavui, there is such a thing of an Amma Bas Chamisha? Says the Gemara, no, Loi. By Sukkah, by Mavui, like Rava's version in the name of Rav Nachman, it's always an Amma Bas Shisha. However, even Rava is Maida that there is one area where the Amma was Taka Mamash, a smaller Amma. Not because the Tfachim were at Sevos, but because the Amma is comprised only of a 5 tefach, only from 5 tefachim. And where is that? L'mu'ute, the Amma of the Yisoid and the Amma of the Soiv. So if someone will have a picture of the Mizbeach and they can put it up on the screen, if you're learning here at home, again with all the Gavaldik Sfarim that we have today, from Rav Adin Even Yisrael, used to be called Rabbi Steinsaltz. If you have an art scroll or all of the other amazing Sfarim, when you'll see it, we're learning it easy. We're learning something very easy, but if you don't have a picture, that's where people feel that it's a little bit difficult to chap. So even without a picture, let's do the best we could. Now we're quoting a pasuk in Yecheskel. Yecheskel was the one that when he had his nevuah about the MERCAVA, he also had his nevuah, he also had the picture that's up. I'm laughing is Gavaldik, but I don't know how much it's going to help us. Let's see if we can get another picture with better dimensions, but we'll use what we have. This is better than nothing. He also had an image of the third Beis Hamikdash. However, his description of the third Beis Hamikdash was not exactly clear. So when we built the second Beis Hamikdash, that which we understood from Yecheskel about his vision of the third Beis Hamikdash, we incorporated in the second Beis Hamikdash. That which remained unclear, we did as it was in the first Beis Hamikdash. Now, this is a pasuk regarding the Mizbeach. Now, Bachlal, the Mizbeach was made out of different widths and lengths. So ultimately, we learned a lot about this in Kachim. The bottom part is called the Yisoid, the base. The base did not wrap itself around all the way around the Mizbeach, but wherever there was a base, the height of the base was 1 tefach, the height. And after it went up 1 tefach, so then it went in another tefach. And that so it went vertical, then it went horizontal. So whenever we learn in the Chumash that the dam was put on the Yisoid, it was put on that horizontal, what we call base. Right away, I'll tell you by heart. Even though the Torah speaks about here in Yecheskel, an Amma up and Amma in, they were not the same Amma. The Amma up was Bas Chamisha. The Amma in was Bas Shisha. Okay, that's the first. Then afterwards, it went up another 5 Ammas until the Soivev. When it went up for 5 Ammas, those Ammas are also Bas Shisha in the Beis Hamikdash. But then when it went in for the Soivev, which is the ledge upon which the Kohanim would walk around, the in 1 Amma of the Soivev was 5. So that was the second time you had in the Mizbeach an Amma Bas Chamisha. The first one is the one that went up. The second one was not the Yisoid. The second one was the Soivev's horizontal. The Soivev's horizontal. Now it went up another 3 Ammas. Now if you have total from the ground, you have 9 Ammas because you have 1 and 5 and 3. Those 3 are also 6. But then the top, which is what we call the horn, the keren, not only was the keren high 1 Amma, Bas Chamisha, but also the keren was a perfect cube. So the width and the length of the keren was also from an Amma Bas Chamisha. And now let's read it inside the pasuk. It says, "Ve'elu midas hamizbeach ba'amois." Now listen how Rashi teaches these words. Amma v'toifach. That the following will be the measurements of the mizbeach, measurements of an Amma, but not your normal Amma. in the Mizbeach, there were some places where it was a small amma. What's that, a small amma? That after you have an amma, you have to add another tefach to come to your regular amma. What does that mean? It means that over there in the Mizbeach, some of the ammos were only a 5 tvachim. That's the pshat, that you need to add another tefach to the amma for you to get into a regular amma. The cheikwa amma and the base, as the Gemara is going to teach, shall be an amma, the amma reichav, and an amma, and the width of an amma. Yeah, the Gemara is going to teach what that means. We're reading the pasuk. Ugvula el sefasa, and the border to its edge, both ways, Savav means around both ways, will be zeres or echad. My friends, zeres is the space that you have between the tip of your thumb and the tip of your pinky if you open up your hand. And if you'll measure on your own body, like we mentioned, that an amma has a body part, which is the forearm, but not just the forearm, from the tip of your middle finger, which protrudes the most, all the way down to your elbow. A zeres is exactly half of it, and Pashat measure it. If you're going to take, if you can see this, if you can take your pinky and open up your hand and go all the way down to the edge of your thumb, and then you're going to do it again, it's mamish going to come down, it's going to be 1 amma. So half of the border that we're talking about is a zeres, and we'll see exactly what that means in a moment. Looking inside back in the Gemara. And v'zeh gav ha-mizbeach, and this is also the top of the mizbeach, end of pasuk. And I will see how difficult it is to understand the pasuk in Yechezkel, because as we'll see, let's read it inside. Touches the Gemara. What's the cheikwa amma? What's the base shall be of an amma that refers to the yisoid? The amma roichav, that refers to the soivev. In other words, the 2 times before you come to the top that you have an amma bas chamisha is mamish the first time you go up an amma 5, and the next time you're going to have an amma 5 won't be when you go in by the yisoid. It won't be when you're going to go up the next 5. It's only going to be when you go in by the soivet. That's the 2 times. And then when it says ugvula el sefasa saviv, that refers to the karanos. We're not even speaking about the height of the keren, which was also from an amma bas chamisha. But the pasuk is speaking about the measurement of the keren, the width and the length. And if he's telling you that if you were to go to the top of the horn and you would go to its center, and then you would measure from its center to one edge going, let's say, east-west, and then you go from the center north-south, you're going to have exactly a half of an amma bas chamisha both times. Because since the entire length and the entire width was an amma, so if you're starting from the middle, you have half of that is a zeres. And then the pasuk concludes, "V'zeh gav ha-mizbeach," says the Gemara, that when Yechezkel says this is the top of the altar, these words are not even referring to the outer altar, which was everything we were talking about until now. But "V'zeh gav ha-mizbeach" is referring to the Mizbeach Hazav. The Mizbeach Hazav, it says, was an amma by an amma, and there also the amma by an amma of the inner altar was ba'amma bas chamisha. So in other words, even according to Rava Mishmei de Rav Nachman, there is one place in the Holy Temple that sometimes we use an amma bas chamisha. So that's why Rashbag adds the words bas shisha l'ma'ute de mizbeach. But the Rava stands his ground. Not only does he stand his ground, but l'Rava, his shita doesn't even go into a machlokes tanoim, because all of the tanoim subscribe that both by the Mabui and by Yasuke and by Kalayim, it's ba'ama bas shisha. I was thinking just of a concept that Chamisha Shisha, we know this from the night of Pesach. 5 are the Torah Shel B'chsav, Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Oh, that's a great picture. Thank you. Great. And then you have the Shisha is the 6 Sedarim of the Mishnah, Torah Shebal Peh. Maybe when you look at the Mizbeach, if we're trying to go up and get close to God, at least it fits in the beginning, easier to understand that the base is Torah Shel B'chsav, the Yisoid. And then you go up, and on top of that, you have the Torah Shebal Peh. And I'm sure there are many other inner meanings as to why exactly was the 1.5 and 1.6 exactly where they were placed. But let's go back to the Gemara. Okay. So now that we spoke about Bechal Shiurim, says the Gemara the following statement: that Omar Rab Chia bar Ashi Omar Rav, you should know that Shiurim means Bechal, all of the standard measures that we have, And look inside Rashi, 2 lines under Tosfos, right? The second line into the widest of lines. Shiurim shenasnu chachamim l'chol davar. Like kizayis dam chelav upigel v'noiser, kizayis min ameis shematamim ba'oil, v'shar shiurim the mafarish l'kamon. You can already keep your finger on the Rashi back in the Gemara. And the dinim of chatzitzin. Chatzitzin means interpositions, like Rashi teaches chatzitza hapiselos b'tefilla. And mechitzin says Rashi, mechitzas, the laws of partitions. Hilchos mechitza. That they have to, number one, it has to be high 10 tvachim. The v'chein shar hilchos sel are all back inside the Gemara. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now, just to get the words correct, halacha l'Moshe Sinai means that when we have something in the oral Torah that has no scriptural basis, that is called halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Any other part of Torah Shebal Peh, even though very little of it is written out explicitly in Torah Shebal, but at least there is a remes to it, not an asmachta, that's already not, but there is some sort of illusion, that's no longer called halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You're going to hear the words midoiraisa min haTorah. The words halacha l'Moshe Sinai means something that has no scriptural basis. So that's the statement of Rav, shiurim, chatzitzin, mechitzin, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And the Gemara is going to challenge each one of these 3 statements by asking that l'chora, there are allusions to it in the Chumash. The Gemara, shiurim should be called de'oiraisa. Where is that? Again, it's not written explicitly, but there's enough of an allusion to it. As it says, I'm recording a pasuk in Parshas Eikev. The pasuk is the pasuk that enumerates the Sheva Minim Shenashtapchu Behem Eretz Yisrael. What does it say in the pasuk? Eretz Chita Usoira Begefen Uteina, right? V'rimain Eretz Zeis Shemen Udevash. Devash means date honey. So says the Gemara, it says Eretz Chita Usoira V'goimer and Amar Abchanan. Where did we have this? We have this in Brachais, that Kol HaPasuk Zeh L'Shurim Ne'emar. Each one of these 7 items, they are a hint to another measurement of shiurim. B'negei halach shiurim. Chita is a reminder of the following halacha of shiurim. L'chedetnan hanichnas lebeis hamenuga. When you enter a house that was declared to be a house afflicted with soras, and there the Torah gives a differentiation as to how tamei do you become. Meaning, when you enter the house, you become tamei immediately. Question is, what about the garments that you are wearing? Do they become tamei as well? And here there is a difference whether you went in and out quickly or whether you lingered on. We'll see in a moment how long. When you go in and out quick, you become tamei, your garments do not. If you linger there, then your garments also become tamei. And let's read it inside. So if you enter there and you're not wearing clothing, but you're holding the clothing, or you have clothing on your shoulder, they become tamei right away. If a kelev al kseifav, if your clothes are on your shoulders, the sandal of the taboisa biyadav, then doesn't matter that you didn't linger. Hu vehem tamei miyat. This concept of if you were not there long enough, it's not tamei. That's only if you're wearing it. Hayulavush kelev v'sandal b'raglav v'taboisa v'etzvoisav. Then hu tamei miyat. However, vehem tahoidim, until you linger. At sheyisha or sheyasha b'chdei. How long? Achilas pras. Pras means a piece of a bread. It's referring to a half of a bread. How much is the volume of a bread? This is a big machlokes rishonim. Rashi ERUVIN Daf Daled says obviously that a bread is comprised of 8 beitzim, and therefore pras, half of it, a part of it means, Rashi writes clearly over here, Daled beitzim. Daled beitzim is the volume of an average meal, mazon beinis. So if you stay there enough time to consume, right, the famous achilas pras, and there are so many different shitas halacha l'maisa, how long is that? Right, for example, we have this when it comes to shiurim. One needs to break the fast on Yom Kippur, then at least don't break it biblically, right? So we say, so then wait between every drink of water to the next drink of water, the time that it takes to eat achilas pras, that's from 3 minutes to 11 minutes to 12 minutes. Okay. And now we go into more details. How do you measure the time that it takes you to eat a bread that's comprised of the volume of 4 eggs, not bread made out of barley, but paschitim, It's pashut. Bread that's made out of wheat can be eaten quicker. Another detail, even that, when you're mesev, when you're leaning and you're eating the bread with lifton, when you're eating the bread with condiments, with relish, that's also a way in which you eat quicker when you're sitting in a comfortable position and you're having the bread with something. Okay, so what do we learn from chita? It helps us better get to the right time to achilas pras. That's a shiur. Let's go, Mike. The next.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Eating it with relish makes it faster or slower? I'm confused.
Makes it faster. You have to understand that the bread then had no taste, and the bread then was probably very. Today we have oil in it. Probably very hard. It wasn't hard. It was pita, but it was probably very difficult to chew and to swallow. So when you smeared on it the mayonnaise or whatever you put on it, then it became easier to eat. Clear. So what's the din? What's the shiur that's connected to this next item in the pasuk? That a human bone, even only in the size of a so'ira bean, of a barley grain, is already matama if you touch it directly, or even if you don't touch it directly, but you carry it. And that's a chiddush because, like we learned in the Mishnah, the ain't matama b'oil. Yes, a corpse, the kula alma from a yid, gives off tumas oil if it's the whole corpse. If you only have bones, we're going to learn. Then you have to have roiv binyan. You have to have roiva hakav. You have to have the skull or the spinal cord. But if you don't have any of the above, then if you have a little fragment of a bone, it's not metama b'oil. But the mago, even kesoida. So the soida again is helping us know the din of how much of a bone do you need to be metama b'mago b'masa. And it's amazing, only such a little fragment. That's the reason why later the Chachamim made a takana on a field that was plowed over, because they are afraid that even the smallest amount of bone, if it's on the surface, you'll touch it. You might touch it and you'll become tamei. The next is geffen. Now, what shiur do we learn from geffen? So the Gemara says, right, the end of the Amid, Kidei Revi'as Yain L'Nazir. And like Rashi writes, the end of the Amid, Revi'as Yain L'Nazir, that if we know that a Nazir has the basic 3 restrictions, can't cut his hair, cannot become Tamei Lameis, and he can't have any grape product. Now, if he has a grape product, how much of it does he have to consume to be chayv a punishment? So Rashi writes, Revi'as Yain L'Nazir, L'chayv Malchus. Problem is, Tosfos asks over here, the big Tosfos, the second Tosfos, that all of the other shiurim were only up to geffen, but everything we learned on Amud Aleph and everything we're going to learn on Amud Beis, the item mentioned in the Torah gives you the shiur. Here, the way Rashi learns, geffen is not giving you the shiur. It's not the size of a grape. It's about the item that you're not. It's about what prohibited item are we talking about? Fakir, the shiur is the shiur of a revi'as. That's a problem. So therefore, Tosfos has a whole different shot in the geffen kedei revi'as yain l'nazir. And Tosfos explains that the Torah doesn't allow the nazir not only not to drink wine or grape juice, but the nazir cannot have any part of the grape itself. So you have the chartzanim and the lulavim. And what happens if he eats that up? No, someone made wine, and you have all of the remains. You have some of the skin, you have some of the pits. How much of it does the nazir have to eat for the nazir to be chayiv? So the din is a revi'as. Now, how do you measure that? Or should a revi'as? How do you measure a revi'as of a salad? So Tosfos says, Gavaldik, that not that you fill up a cup of water, big cup of water, and you put in these grape peels, these remains of the grapes, and when that amount displaces a revi'as of water, that's how you know that now you have an amount of a revi'as. That will be one way of doing it. How much does it displace? That's the system. But you don't look to displace water. It has to be geffen, meaning yayin. You are looking for you to displace wine, because wine, when you pour wine in a cup versus water in a cup, wine is a little bit thicker than water. So therefore, before it overflows, it's able, so to say, to keep in the keli a little bit more. This, it's able to contain itself because of it being adhering to each other, because it adheres to itself. So the shiur of measuring how much displacement to come to the shiur of a Revi is dafka when it displaces the yayin, which comes from the geffen. So in other words, geffen is telling you how to measure the shiur itself. It fits more with the other items mentioned in the pasuk. Turn to the Dal on the base. Now we're going to the next item in the pasuk, te'ena, figs. So what do we learn? What shiur is connected to figs? We just came from a Masechta Shabbos, kigrei geres, loitzah Shabbos. Right, when it comes to carrying, like almost all of the malachas, there is a minimum amount for which you're going to be chayv chatos. Right, we already learned in Shabbos Shitas Rashi that there is a concept of chatzi shiur applied to the shiurim and Shabbos as well. In other words, it's also min atayda according to Rabbi Yechanan. Achloikas Rabbi Yechanan v'Reish Lakish. We paskin like Rabbi Yechanan. Chatzi shiur is also min atayda. But for you to be chayv a punishment, whether it is chatos or God forbid skila, you have to violate the minimum shiur. So if you are carrying, let's say, a food item, how much food item is chashuv enough for you to be chayv? If you carry it, it has to be at least the size of a groi geres, of a fig. Rimain, what's the shiur of a rimain? Kidatran, we also learned this in Shabbos extensively. Kol klei balabatim shiurim kirimainim. Now, if you remember, really, I think it was Rav or Rav, they put together a whole series of how large does a hole have to be in a keli to say, even though the keli is tamei, it loses its tleiras keli because it's not functional anymore, and therefore it loses its tuma. And we had all different levels. There is a crack that allows water to seep out. Then there is a crack that's bigger, that already allows liquid to seep in. Then you have kamoitzi zayis. Then here we're speaking about kamoitzi rimoin. So here we're speaking specifically about a wooden utensil that belongs not to a soicher, Rashi writes, who sells items. And if you are in the business of selling kalim, if the keli has a smaller hole, you won't be able to sell it. It's a blemished, it's a broken utensil. But if you own it, even though you previously was using it to store, let's say, liquids, now there's a hole in it, or you were using it previously to store smaller items, now there's a hole in it, you're not going to throw it out. As long as when you put pomegranates, the pomegranates don't go out of that hole, you will still continue to use it. And therefore, it retains its status of a keli. That's a balabayis. Again, you're not a balabayis. If you are in the business of selling kalim, a smaller hole will make it lose its toira of keli. But for a balabatim, shiurim, kirimayim means kimoitzi remayim. The hole has to be actually a little bit bigger than an imayin. It allows an imayin to come out, then the keli is bottled. Then, weiter back in the pasuk in Ekev, eretz, zeis, shemen, udevash. So eretz, so we're going to take out the word devash. We're focusing on the eretz, zeis, shemen. So eretz, taiches, the Gemara should call shiur es kezeisim. So right away, the Gemara interrupts. All of the shiurim and the Torah are connected to a kezayis. Kol shiur es sachadaitach. We just mentioned everything we mentioned until now is connected to a chita, to a so'ira, to a geffen, to a te'ena, to a rimain, that are not connected to a kezayis. Ella clarifies the Gemara. Ema eret sheroith shiureh are kezeisim. And the final word of devash, sometimes devash means bees honey. But here in this pasuk, devash means date honey. That date is one of the shivas haminim. Devash, what shir is connected? There also, the Torah tells us that we have to be ta'anu es nafshei seichem. We have to afflict ourselves on Yom Kippur. And the Chazal gave us the 5 inun. They defined what affliction means, including we may not eat. What shir is the shir for Yom Kippur? That if one ate that amount, they are no longer afflicting themselves. So the shir is the amount of food that has the same size or volume as a large date. End of the statement. So all of this is back to the kasha on Rav. How can Rav say that shiurin, chatzitzin, and mechitzin are halacha l'Moshe Sinai u'lechura shiurin? That's a classical example. It's taka not written out explicitly, but it should be called the Iraisa and not halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Answers the Gemara. Hold on. We just learned the pasuk. And we learned the whole Chazal, going through each one of the 7. But v'tizbera, are you thinking clearly? Is that a logic? What we read, shiurem michtav ksivi, is that what the pshat on the pasuk is? Absolutely not. The Torah is telling you, Moshe Rabbeinu was telling us, that everything in Eretz Yisrael is better than the rest of the world. However, there are 7 items specifically that mishichle olamayla, shivas aminim. It's speaking about the praise of these products. It's not giving you shiurim. Now, sometimes, of course, the Torah doesn't only have pshat. There are other times that when Chazal, they find an extra word, when they make a drasha with the Yud Gimel Midas, it's not written clearly, but it's considered as if it's written clearly. This is not even on that level. Says the Gemara, Ella, really, everything we learn now is Hilchas Aninu. Or we haven't decided that the Messiah Sashash brings, that it's Midrabanan. Wow, that's a big difference. But let's go with our version right now. That's almost like a kasha. He holds it's all halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The Chachamim later used this pasuk as a way of remembering and leaning ki'ilu these shiurim on the Eretz Chitos Ha'oira. But yes, shiurim is completely a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now we're going to challenge the next statement that Rav made, which was chatzitzin. Chatzitzin means, as you learned in Nashi, a chatzitza, that when a person has to go to the mikvah, there may not be something that's interposing between them, in their body, and the waters of the mikvah. Again, how can you say it is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, the oiraiseninu, the chsiv, the rachatz? Now, guys, the correct reading in the pasuk is as we have on the side, the rachatz bamayim es kol b'sarai. Okay, that's the pasuk, and from there we learn when it says kol b'sarai, all of your basar. That's from the kol b'sarai. From the words bamayim, right? It says v'rachatz bamayim. It means b'mei mikvah. Kol b'sarai mayim means this is now a allusion to the shiur of a mikvah. It has to be kol b'sarai. Means mayim shekol gufay oil b'hem. You have to go into a body of water that you fit in one go. All of you fits in. And v'kamahain, that's what we call 40 saw. But the way you get to 40 saw is if you were to make a mikvah, and the halal of the mikvah, the open space where you put the kosher mikvah waters, is 1 amma by 1 amma, by the height of 3 ammas, that's a total of 40 saw, which is amal amma b'rum gimel ammas. The shiur chachamim that may mikvah should have 40 saw. So here again, you have a source from the words b'sarai shelo yehi davar chaytzois bein b'sarai l'mayim from a pasuk in Chumash. So how is it halacha l'Moshe Sinai? It's doiraisa. Answers the Gemara, you're right. For there not to be a chatzitza between the waters and your basar, doiraisa. However, ki itzrecha hilchasa, for what do we need to have a halacha l'Moshe Sinai? That has no even allusion to in the pasuk. That's lisa oroi. That's for the hair. If without halacha l'Moshe Sinai, we would think, speak about the head, that the part of the head that has hair over it, that's not included in Besarai. And if a person went into a body of water and there was a chatzitza on your hair, you're good. It wasn't to be between you and the basar. It was just between, it was being chaitzitz between the maim and the sa'ar. For that, you have a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Uche de Rabba barafuna. The Amar Rabba barafuna, nima achas keshura chaitzitz. He gave us the following Givaldic concept. One of the natural chatzitzas, when people think about a chatzitza, they think about something foreign on their body. By the way, that's a chatzitza. But here he's speaking about another type of chatzitza, which actually makes it more challenging to go to the mikvah. And that is, if there's nothing foreign on your body, but the hair, as happens naturally many times, wraps around itself and it forms a little knot, or the hair gets knotted. Now, this is the concept. If various hairs together got knotted, not one with the other, but take 3 hairs or more and then make a knot. The hair is long and put a knot on it. Being that you're beginning with 3 hairs or more, 3 hairs gives you a little bit more of width, the knot, unless you'll pull it tight, won't be that tight. So even though there's a knot, the waters will be able to halachically get in between the area where the knot is, and it's not a chatzitz. If only one hair knotted itself, because of it being so skinny, because it's only one, that knot is very tight, and that's a problem. So this is what the Rabbi Barafuna is saying, that nima achas keshura chaytzetzes. If you have 3 hairs, eino chaytzetzes. And then he said, shtayim eni yodea. I just want to clarify something. Obviously, Rabbi Barafuna, as everyone speaks out over here, doesn't mean to say that if a person has 1 hair with 1 knot, that's a chatzitz. Of course not. Of course not. As we'll learn soon, on a doiraisa level, a chatzitz is only if the majority of one's hair will be knotted, or if there's something else covering the majority of one's hair. But you have to know how to count that hair. So a person can have the majority of the hair knotted up, and it's not a chatzitza. Because if each knot, or if the knots that you're counting into the roiv is comprised of 3 hairs or more, even though it's knotted up, I don't care, because it's not a tight knot. But every time you have 1 hair that's knotted within itself, that in that place is a chatzitza. Oh, so where do we get that from? The Torah doesn't say here. The Torah only says b'sarai. That's the halacha l'moshe misinai. That's the answer right now. Upon which the Gemara says not true. So arinami is doiraisa, because when it says in the pasuk v'rachatz b'mayim es, the word es, we darshin esin. The Tanya v'rachatz es called b'sarai. Chazal tell us es hatafel b'sarai. That in the concept of chatzitza, the Torah is adding a word to allude to something. And that S, that's tafel to the basar, is seir. So weiter, it's written, it's hinted to in the pasuk. Answers the Gemara, ki asoyil chasa. For what do we need a halacha l'moshe misinai? Is to the dinim of rubai umeyutai makbid v'she'ena makbid. These are the 2 building blocks that we have to remember halacha l'maisa when it comes to chatzitza. Number 1, that which did interpose, how much did it cover? Now Rashi speaks clearly here about the hair. So let's go Lishitas Rashi, and let's learn the way some learn Bishitas Rashi, that we're going to view the body into 2 parts. The area upon which this hair, there, if a roiv of only that is covered, that's called roiv. You don't need the roiv of the whole body. Or if roiv of the basar is covered with a chatzitza, even if you would have added the place of the hair, you don't have roiv. No, we separate the makim haseir from the makim habasar, and then we look at each one to see whether roiv is covering it. And on top of that, not only do we want to know if majority was interposed, does that person care about it? Now, when it comes to hakpada, halacha l'maisa, we all know that Baruch first we're living at a time that people are very clean. But even in a time in history where Baruch Hashem is running water and people are indeed very clean, which is a very good thing, as we learn Nikios, what Nikios brings to, even physical Nikios, obviously Ruchnisdik Nikios, nevertheless, makbid. Even though sometimes you're clean enough, and sometimes you are bothered because there is a chatzitza. So the hakpada halacha l'maisa means if you are going to a wedding, in other words, you're going to a banquet, you're going into a chashuv and mesiba, will it bother you there that something is interposing upon you? A working man can have relatively dirty hands. Doesn't bother him or her. But when he's going to a wedding, then he'll clean his hands. So makbid means maybe you're not makbid now, but would you be makbid when you're going to a wedding? That's a very important criterion and definition, especially nowadays that it comes to all these types of gimmicks that women put on their nails, and it's taka something on their nails. So the areas of their nails, which is basal, even if you have it on all of your 10 hands and toes, it's not roiv, it's miyut, and the woman will say, I'm not makbid. Why am I not makbid? Because I would go to a wedding like this. And indeed, I think they're called gels. And indeed, by the letter of the law, not based on the minig Yisrael, like I mentioned in the introduction, that for women, for a nida, we're machmer lechatchila, that even if it's miyut, the einoi makbid, we still take it off. But if she didn't take it off bidi event, then if she's not makbid, then it's going to be kosher. However, on the other hand, if there was a crack in one of them, or if there was a chip in one of them, and she would be makbid, then you got yourself a real rabbinic chatzitza. Because midoiraisa, as we learn right now, you need both roiv and miyut. Kid Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak, dvar Torah, rubai umakbid olav chaitzitz. The only time you have a biblical chatzitza, guys, this is roiv umakbid. V'she'ena makbid, even if it covers roiv, midoiraisa, it's not chaitzitz. However, because al rubai she'ena makbid, mishum rubai hamakbid. Next state, and also the chachamim ba'al miyutay hamakbid, if it's only covering miyut on a doiraisa level, even though it bothers you want to take it off. Midoiraisa, it's not a chatzitza. The chachamim said that if it covers miyut, but you are makbid, right? Like the gel that cracked, it's miyut. But if you're makbid, it's a chatzitza. Why? Mishum rubai hamakbid. Now, What were they not goizer on? On miut she'ena makbet. Asks the Gemara, why not? Go all the way till there. The ligzer nami al miyute she'ena makbet mishum miyute hamakbet. Inami mishum rubei she'ena makbet. Why didn't they make Gzeira on that as well? So the Gemara answers, this is a classical answer, that he go for Gzeira. Oh, it's midoi raisa, not midoi raisa. Better, let me word it. Halacha l'moishe misina, I know midoi raisa is that there is a chatzitza. If it's not es kol b'sarai, es b'seyar b'sarai, you got a chatzitza. I know that. That's doi raisa. Halacha l'moishe misina introduced, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, whoa. Chatzitza means rubai umakbet. There's no hint to that. There's no hint to that. When you read the Chumash, you wouldn't know that. Maybe if it's not all the bus, maybe if it's miyut ve'ena makbet, maybe it's going to be a chatzitza d'oraisa. So you wouldn't know that. That's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now the kasha is, why didn't the Chazal make the Gzeira all the way to the end? And midrabanan it should be usher even if it's miyut she'ena makbet. So here we have he go for Gzeira, one step above it, which is miyut hamakbet or roiv she'ena makbet, is in itself a gzeira. So aba'anan neikoim v'nigzor gzeira, we don't have a gzeira, and therefore miyut she'ena makbet is again by the letter of the law completely permitted. So that's the answer.
Rabbi,
yes.
Just to clarify, rubai means majority of the body or majority of the body part? Okay,
rubai means that we take the whole body. That's the halacha today, then. Even though that's a lot of it is based on Rashi here and on Tosfos here, and we divide the body into two different areas: the seyar area, and then the flesh area. And we view the entire of that area as the body, rubai of that part. So if there's something on the hair, did it cover roiv of the person's hair, or did it cover roiv of the body? Never is there a body part. Never is there a body part.
So a cracked fingernail or whatever, that would never be considered rubai. It would just be a question of...
That will be a isur derabanan, which is, God forbid, we're not minimizing a derabanan. But if a woman has a gel she would be aware of, she maybe was not even aware, but had she known that it has that blemish, she would have made it better to go to a chasana, then that's a chatzitza midrabanan. It's called miyut hamakbet.
And doesn't this apply to netilas yadayim as well?
Okay, so for netilas yadayim, we just b'hashgacha pratis, we also learn Shulchan Aruch. By netilas yadayim, we are a lot more lenient. So there is dirt that has to be cleared off for netilas yadayim. But if a woman, just to make it very clear, it's good to know this by the even midrabanan. If a woman has nail polish and the nail polish is half on, forget about gel. It's very imperfect. You know what? She would not even go to the supermarket with it. It's not a problem. Okay, don't forget, netilas yadayim is midrabanan, and here we're speaking about going to the mikvah, which is on a doiraisa level. That's why I'm using the words nida and not using, let's say, tfilas ezra, which will also make a difference. Men today have very little worry about chatzitza because we now don't yet go to the mikvah to resolve a tuma doiraisa, which we're not. We're only resolving a tuma derabanan. Which is why I mentioned the whole from the Shmoyna Asur on Shabbos. One of them was not taking a bath, maybe even a shower after the mikvah does not apply by halacha at all to the men's mikvah today, because that whole sugya of not going into another body of water after the mikvah was only when you're toiveling for a doiraisa they can eat. And now if people have a minig, that's fine. They al pi Kabbalah, if there is such a thing, that's fine. But there's no issue at all. Okay, back over here. Now, the final question, you are telling me that mechitza is, the laws of mechitza is, now one law of a mechitza is that a mechitza is only a mechitza if it's 10 tvachim tall. And that is a halacha l'moshe misinai. Where do we find in the Torah that a partition is called a partition when it's only 10 tvachim or more? This is Gavaldik. The Aroin was comprised of 9 tvachim. Now let's go back to the beginning of today's share. The Torah doesn't speak tvachim. The Torah says that the height of the Aron HaKodesh was an amma and a half. Guys, let's do the math. If an amma is bash shisha, if an amma is 6 tvachim, an amma and a half is 9 tvachim, which is the shita now. Just hold in the back of your head that if the amma is at 5 tvachim. If the Amma is at 5 tvachim, as we learned by the Mizbech, everyone held that some of it was 5 tvachim, then the height of the Adam was only 7.5 tvachim. Then none of what we're saying works. But let's go with the 6. So the Adam was 9. The Kapaitis is a tefach. So that's a total of 10. Harei Kanasara. Now, what does Harei Kanasara have to do with anything? Guys, this is such an important Rashi. We're going to learn the last narrow line into the wide lines. Says Rashi, we're going to learn a Braisa that's quoted in the first Perek of Sukkah. First, Rashi, under the Gemara, the first wide line. Rabbi Yosi Omer will understand better the words that the Rebbe always used, Lamata Masara Tvachim. Whenever the Rebbe speaks about Mashiach, Lamata Masara Tvachim. Where do these words come from? Says Rabbi Yosi, La'olam, La'yarda, Shechina, Lamata Masara, that so far, indeed, until the coming of Mashiach, from the beginning of time, even when the Shechina was here, God wants to come back. God's original presence was here, but never Lamata Masara Tvachim. And that's one of the meanings of the pasuk that we say in Hallel, Hashemayim Shemayim Lashem, V'haaretz Nasan Livnei Yadam. Not, God forbid, the way people erroneously from ignorance say that there's no Hashgacha Pratis because the Haaretz Nasan Livnei Yadam. God forbid. It means that the Gilui of godliness never came down under 10 Tvachim. Ulamata Masara Tvachim Chashiv Aretz. What's the land? What's the world? Not only the earth itself, but the airspace up until 10 Tvachim. As it says, third line of Nashi under the Gemara, the Chsiv, the Dibati Itoch Me'al HaKapoyos. That when Hashem came and spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, God spoke to him from the top of the covering. So the Shechina came until the top of 10. So what do we see, says Rashi, that Asara have a Mechitza. The Lamayla Ma'asara, Lechoshu L'Rishus Tachtis, that L'Rishus Achrite. So the concept of a wall needing to have a height of 10 Tvachim, it comes from the fact that it separates. When you think about a mechitza, most people think that a mechitza is separating that which is on one side of the partition from that which is on the other side of the partition. By the way, that also. But a mechitza does something else as well. The mechitza separates that which is within the airspace of the mechitza to that which is above it. And that we learn from the Kapoides. So that's a kasha. So it's not a complete halacha l'moshe misina. We have a hint to it. So the Gemara says, "Loi tzricha elo Rabbi Yehuda," that this statement of Rav that mechitza is halacha l'moshe misina is according to Rabbi Yehuda. That says that amas binyan ba'ama bashisha, amas kelim ba'amas bas chamisha. Coming back to the topic, but here they are already speaking about the amas that were used in the Beis Hamikdash, and there itself. It's not like everything in the Beis Hamikdash was ba'amas bas chamisha. Kishita was that the kelim and the measurements of the klei kodesh was ba'amas bas chamisha ubemela. How tall was the Aron HaKodesh? Aron HaKodesh was tall around 8.5 tvachim, right? Because you have an amma and a half, that's 7.5, and then you have another amma, 8.5. Okay, so for that you don't have any illusion. You don't have for that. Rav says that mechitza is halacha l'moshe misina. Let's just finish all with Rav Meir, who's the one that argues with Rabbi Yehuda Bechlal. When you have a Rabbi Yehuda, even if the Tanach is without a name, we normally presume Rav Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. All Rav Meir, the Amar Kol Ha'amois are bebeinanis. Interesting word, beinanis, my friends, means 6. Regarding the Klei Kodesh, coming back, in other words, the Aron HaKodesh did have a height of 10 tvachim. So my Yikal Meimer. In other words, are we saying that Rav Meir, we cannot say that mechitzas is halacha l'moshe misinai? Says the Gemara, yeah, we could. Rav Meir, ki yaseh ilchasa, to the din of good that we spoke out when we gave our words of introduction, the din of extension, and good theoretically doesn't only go up as it does good asik. There's also a concept of good achis. The reason why we don't apply it on land is because since animals go in that area, they keilu break the mechitza. But conceptually, there's a concept of good, of extending it up and down. To the din of lavud, there's no allusion to this in the Torah. Again, that if there's a crack in the mechitza, if it's less than 3 tvachim, it's as if it's filled in. And to the din that we learned last daf, which was doif and akuma, whatever the shir is up until 4 amas. But these concepts regarding mechitzas have no emes in the Torah. And for that, yeah, Rav is correct when he says that it's halacha l'moshe misinai. God's willing to be continued. Great. Guys, I'm coming right back. Machai, easy dafin, because it's smaller dafin. Well, guys, I'm sorry about that. Here we go. Here we go.
Rabbi,
Yes.
can I ask you a quick question?
Quick, yeah.
Just practically with this difference between Rav and Abaya on the amos
Yes.
of 5 or 6 versus open fingers or smaller fingers, whatever. Is there a practical difference in terms of the measurement, or they're saying the same thing? It's just how you do
There's
it.
a practical difference. That's at least we understand the history when you tell a person how big is an amma. How big is an amma? So you're going to see there's a halacha l'maisa. There's at least 3 shitas that we follow today or more. And halacha l'maisa, all of this originates from that.
Aha, but we don't know exactly which one's larger or smaller, or
Come from. We follow the shiurim of Rabbi Avram Chaim Noah, which has generally the smallest shiurim, and by him an amma halacha is a little bit more. It's not even 19 inches. That's what I'm saying. It's like a foot and a half. It's a foot and a half and a little bit. All right, Danielle, Hassan, are you here? Because now we're going to need a lot of pictures.
Yes, Rabbi, I'm here.
Chaim Berkowitz. Where's Yaakov? All right, let's go. Guys, it's easy. If you have a good picture, then we're good. Okay, all right, Freilach. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN DAF Hey. We're going to go back on DAF Hey to the opening DAF where we began as to how does the Koira resolve the issue of you may not carry in the Mavui without a Koira or a Lechi because you'll confuse it with Ereshus Harabim. Is it simply because when there is a Koira there and people can see it, it's going to remind them this is the end of the Mavui, this is the beginning of the Ereshus Harabim. That's called Koira Mishum Heker or Mishum Akeda. Or is it more than that? And even though everyone holds that there is a Heked aspect to the Koira, to the crossbeam, but Koira also has to function mitzad a din, but now we'll use the words of a mechitza. Midin mechitza, as we already mentioned when it came to the mechitzas of the last year, that if you have not a wall, but if you have a roof, sometimes you can say that it's yoyred v'soisen, and we're not even concerned, as we spoke out in the last year, of gedoyin boiken boy. Now, Koira mishum mechitza, according to some Rishonim, is the same of Koira mishum Pesach. But that's really a machloikas Rishonim, and we don't have to get it. In Daf Hey, we're going to learn whether Koira mishum mechitza, Koira mishum heker. We're going to be having the question will be, is one allowed to carry under the Koira space itself? In other words, is the Koira matter only that which is within the Koira, or is it also matter that which is underneath the Koira? We're going to start to learn on Daf Hey a case where you have a Mavui Sasum with a proper Koira. However, there is a breach in the wall in the side of the Mavui. And how will that affect the effectiveness of the Koira? We will learn a machlokes between Abaya and Rabbi Yosef. What's the minimum length of a Mavui for you to apply the Dinei Mavui that it's nitar with only a Koira or a Lechi? We will have another case where you have a Mavui that has a certain width by the entrance. Some of it has a wall built, so there is a wall that's separating part of the entrance from the Reshus Harabim. That's called a lechi haboileit midoifnei shel mavui. Do we say that we have to add to that a lechi, or that in itself becomes like a lechi? We're going to also introduce the concept of oimed meruba ala parutz or parutz meruma ala amut. In other words, when you have a partition and there are openings in the partition. So there are times that we say that if the walled partition, the amount that's walled exceeds the amount that's opened, then everything else is good. With the exceptions, obviously, an opening, we already spoke this out on the first daf, can never be more than 10 amas. Whenever there's a wall, but there is a opening more than 10 amas, the cholol is more than 10 amas, we call that a pirza, we call that a breach, and it's mevatel the whole wall. But if there's no opening of more than 10 amas, and you have various openings all over the place, so one halacha you have to remember is Okay, sum total the entire area. If there's oimed, meruma, ala parutz, then you're b'chlal good the way it is, with many, many other details and dinim that is really fascinating. And again, thank God that today we have all of these illustrations that make it a lot easier. Even Rashi, if you look inside DAF, you'll see Rashi and Tosfos, they all make drawings. It's a lot easier to use them, the modern day drawings, for people like us, then understand. Once you get that picture, you can put it right away into Rashi and to Tosfos. But God willing, with all of the pictures that we have now, it's going to be relatively very easy to chop all of the cases and all of the halachas that we will be learning today. Guys, we left off on Daf Daled Amud Beis by the 2 dots, 6 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Says the Gemara. Let's start. Right? If the halal was more than 20 amas, there is a kaira, but it's too high, l'tanakama. And now, like the Tanakama, Chachamim say, you might. And you're coming to make the entrance 20 amas or less. One way of doing it will be to put the beam down. Another way of doing it is to add earth by the entrance of the mavoi under the kaira. So when you enter, you're going up on a mound, and now it's in the right shiur. So the question is, how much do you have to diminish the entrance? So the Gemara right away asks on the question, what kind of question is that? It depends, if the kaida was 5 amas too tall, then you got to make a 5 amas mount, right? If the kaida was only a tefach too high, then only make a tefach mount. It's like the Gemara on the question, the Gemara says, no, that I know. We're not speaking about how tall does the mound have to be. We want to know how deep does it have to be. Sometimes we use the words mishchay, rechavai, and there's a ream and there's a logic for that, rhyme and reason for that. But here rechavai is referring to how deep in do you have to make the mound on the ground. Rechavai bekama, my friends, we have a machlokes, Rabbi Yosef and Abaye. We're going to have on today's daf 2 arguments and 2 different dinim. And both are consistent that Rabbi Yosef is going to give the smaller shiur. Here, the smaller shiur is a tefach. And by the way, we already learned that the minimum width of the crossbeam is a tefach. So it's going to be mamash, all of the area under the kaida will be of the right height. And you don't need more than that. Abaye says, no, 1 tefach is not enough. Arba'ah. Whenever there's a hey at the end of the word, it goes to tfachim. Just to remember that. Whenever there is an ayin at the end of the word, it goes to amos. It's very simple. So he says, arba means that 1 tefach is not enough. You have to have 4 tfachim. If I'm not mistaken, the picture that's on the screen is not good. That picture, Dr. Danielle, is also not good. You have to go back. That picture is for the next daf. It's for later on. Because stop, go back, go very good. That's the picture. I can't see good. It's going up. If that was a picture before them, are good. In other words, here you see the picture that he's showing is Abaye. Abaye is showing that the mound or the platform that you built, the platform that goes up, is not only under the kaida, it goes further in. Says the Gemara, what's behind the machlokes? Lema b'hakom ifli. The man, the Omar Tefach, which is Shitas Rabbi Yosef. Why does he hold that a Tefach suffices? Here's the question. Are you allowed to carry even under the area of the beam? And what's the issue over here? Let's read inside the last Rashi in the Amud. Right? Man, the Omar Tefach, the Omar Chudei Hachitzon Yored V'Soisam. No, we are going with the concept of koida mishum mechitza. Guys, there is a heked aspect, l'kul alma, which is the whole reason of 20 amas. But it's not enough for you just to notice it. You have to have a certain halachic instrument, which is this koida makes a mechitza. How does it make a mechitza? Because of the rule of you take the edge of the koida, and as if that's the halacha l'moshe misina, it goes all the way down. Now, whenever you have a koida that has to be at least a tefach wide or a tefach deep, which part goes down? So Rabbi Yosef holds that the one closest to the Reshus Harabim goes down. The Hilkach, the second to last line in Nashi, Kivan the shiur esrim ama mishum heked. There is a heked aspect. That's the meaning of Nashi. Hadei heked. Since that area is also included in the mavui, and when you are in that area, if you're standing on that platform, that's very little. It's only one tefach deep. So what? There you can notice the kaira. So again, it's mishum mechitza, but and you have also the heked aspect. DAF hey. However, with the hey at the end, that shita sabaya for tfachim, you know why a tefach is not enough? Because sabaya holds asruli shtamash tachas hakayra. So if you only make a platform under the kayra, it's worthless because that's not the area that you can carry. Where you can only carry up until the area under the kayra. So therefore, it's not enough for you only to make a platform under the kayra. So hold on. So make it 2 tefachs. So guys, remember this is a rule we'll learn that there are certain standards of shiurim. Whenever a tefach is not enough, the next level in halacha of a significant area, you're not going to find in a halacha anything about 2 tefachim. The next significant size after the size of a tefach, let's go with that, is going to be 4 tefachim. Oh, that's one way of understanding it. In other words, that what you can't use under the kaira because the P tikra yored v'soisem is not from the outer edge; it's from the inner edge. And you're also that you have to see it. So when you're standing inside the mavui, not under it, you still have to notice it. So again, if not one, you jump from one to the next. The next significant is 4. Says
Rabbi, by him doing 4, isn't that really only adding 3?
Very good. By him saying 4, it's adding 3. Correct.
So, but you're saying going.
Let me just say what Danny's asking in different words is, why did he have to say 4? Why didn't he say 3? Or I'll go more. There is no 3. If the next significant size after 1 is 4, why would it not have to be? 4? Which would
No, I'm saying it should be 5.
Very good. So that's the way many of the Achronim learn the next line in the Gemara, Danny. Or it's the reason this would be a good rationale behind Abaya and Rabbi Yosef. The Gemara rejects this. Why is this the Gemara? Normally the Gemara rejects it because we want everyone to subscribe to the same shita. But that will be another deeper understanding in the Gemara. Doesn't work, like you mentioned, because then it should be 4 from outside. It must be that since we are using this way of the Achronim, that if you don't use a tefach, the next significant side is 4 tefachim. It must be that even according to Rabbi Yosef, you are allowed to use the area under the kaira. So now you have to take a 4. That's the next line. According to the Ravid and other Rishonim, what we're learning now is not adding a 3rd sheet on kaira, because we had on that base Mishum Pesach. Mechitz and Pesach, L'Ravid is the same. The Machlokes is, how does the kaira work? Mar Savar, my friends, this goes according to Rav Yosef, right? The Machmed here, the Mekel here, only a tefach. He holds Koren Mishum Heker, and that's it. Everyone holds you can carry under the Koren. And if you're standing under the Koren where you can carry, since there you don't have the halal more than 20, you're good. However, Mar Savar, Abaye, who adds the shiur 4 tefachim, he holds that Koren Mishum Mechitza. Oh, Gavaldik. Now, 1 second. So what? I'll tell you so what. When do we say that a mechitza functions as a mechitza? There are dinim of mechitzas. We had this in the last year. One din is that a mechitza has to have a height of 10 tefachim. You know, my friends, there's another din of a mechitza. A mechitza is only a mechitza if it's circling, if it's enclosing, if it's partitioning an area of 4 by 4. How great is that? And it's not that there are 4 mechitzas here. What you find by dinei mechitza is the shiur of 4 tefachim. So it has to function mitzad the din of mechitza. Where do you have a mechitza? You take the edge of the koida and you put it down. The edge that's in the outside. The edge touching the Rishus Harabim. But for you to be able to do that, it has to be partitioning an area of 4 tefachim. No mechitzas is for less than 4 tefachim. That's where you get to 4 tefachim. Mamash Moed. The Eba Yisema, the Kula Hamel Koida is only because of Heker. Only because of Heker. So there's a practical answer. And yes, the Koida only needs to be 1 tefach. And if it's less than that, you won't notice it. But if it's 1 tefach, you'll notice it. However, do we say that the shiur of one tefach, which allows you to notice, is something that is only l'mayla, l'mato, you need to have more, as we'll speak out, or no? If you only have one tefach of platform to stand on, that's enough. You'll notice it. I should understand this so good practically. Even when you look up naturally, my friends, unless you make an effort to look straight up, you see high in the horizon up until 20 amos, but you don't see that which is right above you. In other words, if the only place where you can see the qaida is when you're standing underneath the qaida, it's not called a heker, because people don't put their heads to look all the way up. You have to be outside the area, not underneath the qaida, and still be able to see the qaida. And for that, again, why 4? What's the magic of 4? We're going to go the whole sugya. If it's not a tefach, then the next significant shiur is 4 tefach. Yes, heker shel mata ke heker shel mayla. However, and therefore, 1 tefach would have been enough. It's only mishum mekeda. But there's exeda. We are beginning with a mavui that has too much height. You're building a platform. The platform that he showed on the picture over here was a nice wooden platform. They didn't build wooden platforms. They would put earth. They made a mound of earth. A mound of earth, when people are going back and forth the whole time, will erode. So therefore, if you start out with the minimum amount, the moment it erodes a little bit, you're done. You got a problem. So again, make it 2 tefachs. Theoretically, yeah, but we don't do that. Once a tefach is not enough, the next significant amount is 4 tefachim, and even when it erodes, you'll have enough of the 1 tefach that's taka really needed. I heard from Rabbi, our Rosh Yeshiva Miami, a Gavaldik marshal of all these concepts. You add, because Shema Yivchois says that there was a woman that went into a Sfarim store years back in Europe, and she wanted a siddur with Alam Mefarshim. And they told her, why do you're that learned? You need a siddur with all the commentators. So she pulled out her old siddur, and she said, listen, the siddur that I have, I got from my mother, her from her mother. The siddurim in our families last for hundreds of years. And after a long time, the pages of the siddur, or the periphery of the siddur, they get rubbed out. So if the siddur itself will go from side to side, so then when there'll be a yitzchois, the siddur itself is going to get lost. I'm going to buy a siddur with mefarshim, so the mefarshim will get rubbed out, but the siddur itself will remain. That's the concept of Chal in Yiddishkeit, all of the advantage of adding. Why are we adding chumras? We know that there's an isser to add to the Torah, to subtract from the Torah. No, we know what the Tayag mitzvahs are. But when you add to it, and especially when we're not even speaking about Me'ikad Adin, we're speaking about Minhagim and stuff like that. So the Maila is that then in life, sometimes we lower our standards. At least we began, and it was adding so much that even after the Yitzchak, the Ikad will never get lost. Next case. Again, we're going to have over here Abaye and Rabbi Yosef, not with the same numbers, but the concept that Rabbi Yosef will be the Mekel and Abaye is going to be the Machal. As we learned above, that there is a minimum height for the Qaida, that if you don't even have 10 tfachim, you don't have 10 tfachim, let me you bang your head plus, then the mavoi, then the Qaida is not matir the mavoi. So here we have the same concept. If the mavoi was placed, but you want to make sure that when you enter the mavoi, when you go under the Qaida, there is the minimum of 10 tfachim. So what do? That's the picture, Dr. Hassan. It means that now you're excavating. So when you enter, you have, I think that looks like the plat. Oh, very good. That's the picture. So here again, how much do you have to excavate? And again, the initial understanding is how much. Well, depends how low the qaida is. If the qaida is 8 tefachim, you got to do 2. If the qaida is 9, you only got to do 1. Again, but no, says the Gemara. When we learned before Rachvai, here we're learning Nishchai. The Chazal were consistent. Rachvai is when you're making a mound. When you're going down, they use the word Nishchai, but it means the same. It's how deep into the Mavoi do you have to excavate? Bekama. So interesting. It's interesting that no one says 1 tefach is enough. No one says that. Rabbi Yosef, the Mekel, Dalet, guys, I know by me it's base Dalet with Ashtreshel. Maybe in the newer Gemaras it's written out, but it's Arba'ah Mitahei. 4 tfachim. And look at the chumrah. Abaye says 4 amas with an ayin at the end. Oy gewalt. Now the question is, what are they arguing about? So let me explain the following. Everyone agrees that in order for you to be matir that koira that was initially placed very low, you have to excavate an area that area in itself halachically qualifies as a mavui. So really, l'choura, the machlokes should be how much of an area is qualified as a mavui or not. The truth is, even though 4 tefachim is mamash on nothing, doesn't matter. People really didn't go from the Rishus Harabim into the house. There was a chutzner in front of the houses, and they built the chatzeros in a way that it's not also right on the main thoroughfare. So even having a little bit of an entrance, according to some, we'll see, of only 4 tefachim, that's the alleyway that they needed. So says the Gemara, l'choura, lema, b'Rav Ami v'Rav Asi kumiflagi. Not that Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, each one is taking a different side. Rav Ami and Rav Asi say the same thing. The question is, do they agree with Rav Ami or Rav Asi or not? The Itmar we learn. Now they spoke about the following case. Now comes to the next picture. And guys, a lot more about this. Next daf and daf off. Mavui shenifratz mitzidoi. Got a proper mavi. Everything is good. It's a mavi shasum. You put a kaida or a lechi. Alsa's kosher and fine. And now the wall on the side, let's get a picture of a wall on the side to the marble breached open. Where klape roishai, near the entrance, near the Rishus Harabim. So what's the question? The question is, before we go inside, if people commonly will use now the breach as their new entrance to the mavoi, take a look at the picture, there is no kaida on that breach. So you have a mavoi whose entrance doesn't have the mavoi or lechi. So says these Amiran. Itmer, we learned in the name of Rav Ami and Rav Asi the following: Im yesham pas dalid. I'll put the picture back up. If the standing side post that's touching the koira has the width of guys dalid, means mitahei arba'a. If yeah, it's a pity I can't. Maybe Daniel can make a circle around that. The area that has the on top of the other side, the closer one. If that is on the side post that has 4 tefachim, you're pointing to the wrong area. You're pointing to the wrong end. Daniel, go to the other side. Yeah. If that has the width of 4 tefachim, so then matir bepirza adeset. Even if the breach is up to 10 amas, then you're good. They love, but if the pass exactly where he has that X, if that pass doesn't have 4 tefachim, so then we only tolerate a breach less than 3 tefachim. Pachus mishloisha matir, because we apply the din of lavud. We make believe as if the breach is not there. If it's shloisha, if the breach is 3 tefachim, eino matir. Now, why is that? I'll tell you why is that. L'choura. According to Rav Ami and Rav Asi, a mavui is a mavui if it's covering an area 4 tefachim. And that's what we're looking for. We need to make sure that the koira is being matir a mavui. Once it's being matir a mavui, even though if the breach is up to 10 amas, many people will enter through the breach. Doesn't matter. This mavui has an entranceway to a mavui, and we made the heket. However, if it doesn't even have 4 tefachim, if the pass, where the X is, if that piece of wood, if that wall doesn't even have the depth of 4 tefachim, so then the koira is not being matir a halachic mavui. If it's not being matir a halachic mavui, then the mavui has no koira at all. That's why it's not good. No, it's l'chaura. They are saying they're din based on the premise that even if you have a mavui only a 4 tefachim deep, it has a din of a mavui. And that l'chaura will be the shita, going back to our machlokes of Rabbi Yosef, who says that you only have to make an excavation of 4 tefachim because now you have a din of a mavui. And
Rabbi
will not accept their shita. Very good.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Can you just clarify something about, according to this opinion of Rav Ami and Rav Asi, if you had this situation with the breach and then you had 10 amos, so don't you have 2 separate mavuis, the front one and the back one?
Separate entrance ways. Very good, Danny. But let me ask you a question. The area of the pass, the only way to enter there properly from the Reshus Harabim, right, is from the front, right? People would not enter, if they would want to enter the area where there is a side board, they wouldn't enter it from the breach. Ubemela, since the koira is mated, that area, the rest of it is part of the same mavoi, it works for the rest as well. Okay, that's right. So l'chora, lid of Yosef, right? The lenient opinion, the opinion that says that you only have to excavate the earth up to 4 tfachim, is leided of Ami, that the minimum size mavoi is a 4 tfachim. And la Abaya, l'chora, less leided of Ami, very good. So Amar la Abaya, no. Over there, I'm going to argue that everyone holds that when you build a mavoi from the outset, a mavoi has to have 4 amas. 4 amas, arba mit an ayin. Eloma, once you already built a mavoi, and now there is a problem in the mavoi, and you want to restore the status of a mavoi, there you only have to have 4 tvachim. That's called soif mavoi. So it's a big difference. But to establish something lechatchila, Abaya will hold that even Avami and Avasi will hold. You got to make a mavoi from the outset with a minimum of 4 amas. Hasam soif mavoi, hachat chilas mavoi. By chilas mavoi, that's what the Abaya holds, that everyone holds. Ika arba ama is good, and if not, not. So now, Omar Abaya no amin Allah. That what shitas Abaya? That you got to make a mavoi of 4 amas. If you have an area that's smaller than 4 amas, it's not a mavoi. Pashit the time we learned in Abraisa. Ein mavoi niter with only a lechi or only a koira. Achiyu batim v'chatzei rois suchem letoichai. You have to have 2 houses, which is the minimum for each chatzir, and each mavoi has to have 2 chatzei rois, which by the way means every mavoi has a minimum of 4 houses. 2 batim for each chatzir, 2 chatzei rois. And now he says very simple. V'i b'dalid, again by me, dalid means every time you see a dalid with ashtreichel, it's 4 tfachim because it's arba with a hey at the end. Even dalid hechem mishkachoslo. Based as Rashi says, 7 lines from the bottom, 8 lines from the bottom, that the smallest halachic opening that's called the Pesach. And my friends, there is an opening into the chutzner. There's a Pesach into the chutzner. If the smallest opening is 4 tfachim, how is it shaykh to have a mavoi? The whole mavoi is only 4 tfachim deep, and in it you're going to have 2 openings for chatzeiros. You can't even have 1 opening, like Rashi says, because 1 opening, a Pesach means you have side posts, right? You have the petzimin, you have a lintel, and through it you enter an entranceway. But if the whole width, if the whole mavoi is 4 tfachim, it's not shaykh to have a Pesach to the chutzner. This picture to me is very confusing. Let's get another picture. So the kasha is obvious. The proof is obvious. The proof is that of course you have to have 4 amas. It's not shaykh in a mavoi of 4 tfachim to have 2 psachim, each one of 4 tfachim. And if you're going to say, I'll give you the answer. We are discussing the depth, the length of a mavoi. Maybe the mavoi is very wide. So the back wall is very wide. In it, you have 2 openings. The Pesach law, the Pasach law, the middle doifen means the back wall, and that back wall could accommodate 2 entrances because it's very wide. That can be because Nachman Nikitinan, we have the following tradition that a zeo mavi shenita with only a lechi or only a kaira. We're not speaking about the size, but we're speaking about a concept, which is kol sha'arka yaser al rachbay. You got to have the length longer than the width. If we're speaking about 4 tfachim, you know what? Then the doifen or amsoi has even less than 4 tfachim. And he added the Mishnah that then we learned in the Braisa. So l'chayda, that's great. That's a raya on Abaya, and it's a kasha. Rabbi Yosef says Rabbi Yosef no. Don't forget Rabbi Yosef holds that even a mavoi tchilas mavoi can be 4 tfachim. He says the pasach law Koren obvious. Now for the Koren obvious, that's where you need to have a picture. But if I can speak it out by heart, if you get a good picture, that's not the picture for the Koren obvious. But the good concept is, yes, a Pesach is a minimum of 4 tfachim, but the 4 tfachim don't have to be in the same direction. You can use 3 tfachim of the 4 tfachim depth for the Pesach, and one other tefach from the other perpendicular direction, from the doifen o amsoi. And if you have a good picture for that, you'll mamish see how you can have a mavoi only made out of 4 tfachim, and you're going to have 2 halachic psachim, each one 4 tfachim, but not in the same. The 4 tfachim will be an L, and each one, the right and the left, will lead you into a different chatzir. Each chatzir will lead you into 2 batim, so it's shiur. Okay, so that's very good, very good, very good. Look at the picture here, diagram A. That's a great picture. So if you look at the floor, every box is 1 tefach. So what he's trying to show you is that when you enter this mavoi, you look only to the right or to the left, 3 tefachim is already open. So all you need to make a Pesach of 4 tefachim, you don't need a lintel. You only need over here the walls. You need to have the Rashi says the petzim and the side posts. If the wall is narrow in the center, allowing you a tefach on each side, so each chatzar has an opening of 4 tefachim. And the ganze mavoi only has 4 tefachim. Beautiful. Back inside the Gemara. Another proof, that a minimum size of even tchilas mavoi. Abaya says that you need to have tchilas mavoi for amis because he needs another proof. Because Rabbi Yosef got out of this one. The Amar Rami Bar Chama. In the name of Rav Huna, we're going to be spending time on this din. Lechi haboy, let me doip nashal mavoi. Guys, let's get a picture up over here. You are entering the mavi from the Rishus Harabim. Until now, all of the pictures that we looked at was there's an opening, you enter into the mavi. No, there's a scenario where people in the mavi didn't want too much of the mavi to be open to the Rishus Harabim, so they built a wall. They built a wall. So if the wall that was built, that's running and closing some of the entrance is less than 4 amas, speaking about the width now, then that wall itself, very good. Look at the left of this picture. So you'll see that they built a wall, very good. So nida mishum lechi, that is the lechi. And therefore, all this is in the name of Rav Huna. However, if the wall is of 4 amas or more, then nida mishum mavui, then it is called a wall of the mavui. We look at this halachically like the mavui itself, and now you got to enter a mavui. It's opened. Midrabanan, you got to put a lechi achalatir. You can put a kaira, or you have to put another lechi. Now, Abai doesn't have to elaborate. Why? What's the fluchora? Is that once you have the measurement of 4 amas, I know that Abai is speaking about the depth, and here we're speaking about the width. I know that. But the havamin is the concept that the moment you hit the shiur of 4 amas, that's a mavi for itself. And therefore, this is part of it's a wall of the mavi. So that's an ayah to Abaya. Here also, Rabbi Yosef says no. Rabbi Yosef says, don't convolute the minimum size of a mavoi to whether you can consider this wall a lechi. Lafu kemitvaras lechi adik arba amas. To say that this wall cannot be called a lechi, why would we say that? I know there's no minimum depth of the lechi can be very skinny. The koida has to be a tefach. The lechi can be skinny. There are other dinim of lechi. It has to have a minimum height. It has to be placed within 3 tefachim. Fine. But if it's too big, so what? There's a din that if it's not 4 amas, it's still called a lechi. But lemehevi mavui. But again, when it comes to dinim of a mavui, afilu ba'arba tefachim nama ava mavui. So Abaya and Rabbi Yosef's machlokes stands. Now that we mentioned this din of Rav Huna, you can keep the picture up. Says the Gemara Gufa, we learned above that Amar Rami Bar Chama in the name of Rav Huna, that when you have a lechi, that's haboilet midafnei shel mavi, as we see in the picture of our turning to the family base. Then the rule is like this: that if this entire width of the wall is less than 4 amas, that wall itself is nidoin mishum lechi ubemeile ve'ein sarach lechi achalatir. However, says Rav Huna, if the wall is 4 amas or more, then nidoin mishum mavui, it becomes part of the mavui. It's a wall of the mavui. And now you need to have a lechi achalatir. And again, it can be a koira, but we're focused on the lechi. So it's asked to come out a practical question. Where will you put the new lechi? Because what's the challenge? If you're going to add to the width of the wall, it's not going to be a heker, because it's going to look like you made the wall wider. If you put it on that same side, and it's more or less going to have the same height, so it won't be a heker. it's just going to look like that oisufa you just added to it. And like we learned, even in today's shiur we began that even if you're going to say that koina mishum mechitza, everyone holds that there is, at least lachachamim. I'm not going to DAF. Okay, we're not going to DAF. What we're going to, there is a heket aspect connected to it. Number one, one solution will be put the lechi on the right side of the picture, not on the side of the wall, on the other side. Or Rabbi Yeshua says no. Put it on the same side of the wall. Either the metafe, make it larger, meaning make it taller, or even the mavatza, bigger chiddush, make it shorter. People will notice that you did not extend the wall. It doesn't have the same height. It's not uniform. They'll see that this is the heket that is needed by the entranceway of a mavui. That if the lechi is 4 amas, it does not, it's no longer a lechi, it's not matter carrying in the mavui. That's only if the mavui itself means if you were to take out that wall, if the width of the entrance is 8 amas or more, 8 amas or wider, in other words, the wall doesn't close, does not partition more area that's open. It's not oimed meruma ala parutz. Aval if the mavui's width is only 7 or less, only 7, and you have taka wall that's 4 amas, 7 amas width, you have a wall of 4 amas. So then you don't need a lechi or a koida. The wall is not a lechi or a koida, but you don't need it anymore. Because as we mentioned, and we will be learning that according, and that so holds almost all the Rishonim, midoi raisa, an area that is closed with 3 mechitzas, meaning on each ruach, from the 4 ruachos, 3 of them have mechitzas, it's a reshus hayachid, a bona fide reshus hayachid. It's only the chachamim, they did not allow you to carry in the mavui. It's open to the reshus harabim. People don't know where one ends, where one begins, v'chulei v'chulei. But the moment you have a wall on the 4th side, that's what if we're speaking about a wall on the width to the entrance, there is a wall. If the wall is covering the majority of the opening, so then the wall portion exceeds the breach portion. This means that it's a bona fide mechitza. So there are 4 mechitzas here. If there's 4 mechitzas, so to say, you don't need a koida or a lechi. How do I know that? I know that because I have a kaluchaymet from a din of a chatzir. Now, guys, we will learn a lot more of dinim of chatzeres and DAF Yud Beis. But just to be aware, however you define a chatzir, there's definitions to a chatzir. We just learned to know Aleph, by a mavui, the length exceeds the width. A chatzir has to be the opposite, or a chatzir has to be square, and many other dinim. Now, when it comes to the din of a chatzir, if there is a breach, let's speak about a chatzir that's open to the reshus harabim. A chatzir is not nitar with only a koida, only a lechi, which means generally we are more machmer when it comes to this rabbinic isur of carrying in a chatzir that's open to a reshus harabim. No ma chatzir she'ein in a teretz belechi or a koida. Nevertheless, that we learn clearly by a chatzir that if the wall that's open to the reshus harabim has more standing wall than opening, then niteres bo'oimin meruma ala parutz. When it comes to a mavui, generally Chazal were more lenient by the mavui. How do we know that? Sheniter lechi or just a koida is einoi din sheniter bo'oimin meruma ala parutz. So we're not contradicting b'chlal. We're not challenging it afuna. We are limiting it afuna. We're saying the moment the entranceway has more wall than not, then you b'chlal don't need a lechi or a koida. Says the Gemara, I don't have a kal v'chayim. You know why? Because don't kal v'chayim. Who says that the mavui is kal? You're only using the din of a koida or a lechi to come to the conclusion. By chatzir, a chatzir is more chamur or more machmer. No, there's another din in which we're the opposite. Ma lechatzir shekaim pirtzatza be'eser. Once you have a wall, and now there's a breach in a wall, all right, even if there is a breach that is 10 amas, not more, which is also what we learned in the beginning regarding the entrance to the mavui, then we say that it's not mevatel the Torah of mechitza. However, toimer b'mavui, and guys, that will be tomorrow's daf vav. When you have a mavui, and we learned a little bit, we already learned this on Amud Aleph a little bit. What happens? What happens if there is a breach in the wall of a mavui? So in Amud Aleph, we spoke about how much of the pas remained. Now let's focus on how wide is that pirza. So I know that I mentioned up to 10 amas, but really we're going to see in that vav that there is a rule, shepertzasoi, we only tolerate a pirza of arba'ah. It's very important to add a hey. That there, if there is a pirza of 4 tfachim, it's mevatel that wall. It's mevatel that wall. That means that this din here, a mavui is more chamor than a chatzit. So therefore, you lost your whole kal v'chaimer. Who said that the chatzit is more chamor? Yeah, true, I know that. Chatzit is not knitted b'koyre v'lechi, but we tolerate a greater pirza. By a mavui, as we'll learn tomorrow on Davav, we tolerate lesser of a pirza. So you lost your kal v'chaimer. Says the Gemara, Koshava Rafuna b'derei Rabbi Yeshua. Who made this kal v'chaimer? Who said this din on the Hayamud base? Not Rafuna. It was Rafuna b'derei Rabbi Yeshua. He holds, like we spoke on Amud Aleph, that when you have a mavui, same thing. That if there is a breach in a side wall of the mavui, also if it's not bigger than 10 amas, it's not mavakel that wall of being a mitoiras mechitza. So therefore, the only din when you contrast mavui and chatzit is more chamor. So I have a kal v'chaimer. So right away counters the Gemara, the din that we learned on Amud Beis. Rafuna b'derei Rabbi Yeshua. He's giving you a qualification, b'shitas Rafuna, lema ka'amerina la lirafuna. However, as we'll learn on Davav, Rafuna himself clearly holds that by a mavui, if there is a breach of only 4 tfachim, again, dalad is a tfachim, it's considered a breach. So there is no kal v'chaimer l'Rafuna. Says the Gemara, I don't have a problem. Rafuna b'derei Rabbi Yeshua was not telling you what Rafuna will hold. He is telling you his shita. In other words, he heard what Rafuna said. He says, fine, I could agree to Rafuna as long as you don't have the oimed meruma alaparos, because the moment you have the oimed alaparos l'shitasi, I can make a kal v'chaimer from a chatzin, and by a chatzin we apply the din of oimed meruma alaparos, and therefore by a mavui, which l'shitasi is kal, for sure you can apply the same din. That's one approach. Ravashi now takes Rafuna b'derei Rabbi Yeshua and he goes further. And what does he say? Afilu tema b'mavui shmaina, not the way you Rafuna b'derei Rabbi Yeshua says that only b'mavui shiva nitar b'oimed. Ravashi says no. That even if it's wide 8, which means that the wall is half, still you don't have to put a lechi in addition to this wall. And because I have this manavshach, what's the manavshach? Now, when it comes to measuring, are we able to measure things to an exactitude? This is a topic that Chazal discussed various times. And to differentiate our discussion versus other discussions, there is a difference whether we are measuring something that was made by God versus something that's made by man. Here we're speaking about a wall that's man-made. All right? So in this context, maybe you're not measuring it perfectly. You think that the wall is 4, maybe not. Maybe we don't know how to measure perfectly. And in Mordechay, maybe the wall is not 4 amas, it's a little bit more than 4 amas. So then he, Rav Ashi, agrees to the shita of Rafuna b'derei Rabbi Yeshua. He does make the kal v'chaimer from a chatzin. He holds that mavui is more kal than chatzir. So we apply the rule, is nitar b'meimer alaparos. And even if, he's gavalik, if the wall that you think is 4 is a drop less than 4 by a millimeter, something that a human being is EF shalat samson. Perfect. If the opening is 8 and your wall is 4 minus a mashahu sheba mashahu, so gavaldik. So now you have a lechi. Because everyone subscribes. Like Rafuna says, like we have on top of the Amid, the top line in the Amid, that pachos me'arba needed mishum lechi. That's a great amount. And my Amrat, however, what can you counter? You can counter, no, that's exactly perfect. Maybe it's perfect. In other words, there are 3 options here. Either that the wall that you built is a drop less than 4, the wall that you built is a drop more than 4. Either one of these options will be matir the mavui, but what will happen if it's exactly 50-50? Now you got a problem because we are accepting the rule that once the wall is 4 amas, it's not called a lechi. And if it's tak exactly 50-50, you need to have oimid meruba ala paras. You don't have the meruba. So Rav Ashi is not discounting that possibility, but he's saying that if it's the Shavit Anadi, but you don't know that. You don't know that. Maybe. And therefore, it says Rav Ashi Bechlal, all of the dinim that we're learning, making a kaida or a lechi is all a din d'Rabbanan. Because within Torah, the Mavi is a Rishus Hayach. So we're learning about a suffix in a din d'Ivreim. So Rav Ashi applies the rule, Havli suffix d'Ivreim, and the suffix d'Ivreim is lo hakel. How great is that? That we'll stop over here, because then once we start, it already goes into the whole new cases. We'll have a navav of the breach in the side of the wall of a mavi that we already spoke about, whether it's like a din chatzir, whether maybe it's more chamur than a din chatzir, v'chulei, God willing, to be continued. It doesn't get easier.
Shkoyah, Rabbi.
Shkoyach, Rabbi. Very good.
Shalom to everybody.